On the afternoon of February 1st, 2013, a retired Army veteran named Robert Smith limped his way into the emergency room at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Washington, D.C. Robert was in his late 60s. Robert had gotten a kidney transplant a year and a half earlier, but a few days ago, Robert had noticed this throbbing pain in his right hip that was shooting pain all the way down his right leg, and so that was why he was finally here at the hospital. A couple minutes later, the doctor walked into the room. She concluded that very likely what Robert had was something called sciatica that typically clears up on its own without treatment. And then he left and headed back to his home. 3 days after Robert's trip to the ER, now when he tried to stand up, he couldn't put any weight on his right leg. He now had this new pain in his abdomen that was located right around where the scar was from his kidney transplant, and Robert was also starting to spike a fever. He knew he had to go back to the hospital, and then Robert hobbled his way back through the doors into the ER. The doctors just began testing Robert over and over and over again for all these different things that could be the cause for his illness. But every test they ran came back negative. And at the same time, Robert just kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker. The medical staff decided to just start testing Robert for basically completely random diseases, and all these tests came back negative except for one. The only way to truly confirm that diagnosis was to literally cut into Robert's brain, which would kill him. And so obviously they were not going to do that. And they tried giving various medications to Robert. None of them were working. And then finally, on February 27th, he would die from this mystery illness. During Robert's autopsy, the medical examiner was able to perform that test. He saw very clearly that yes, Robert really was positive for that rare virus. The virus that killed Robert was also highly contagious. And so they handed the case over to the Centers for Disease Control, or the CDC. One of the CDC investigators decided to look into the transplant file. Robert's donor's name was William Edward Small, and at the time of his death, he was 20 years old and serving in the Air Force. When the CDC investigator read through all of William's symptoms, they basically exactly lined up with all of Robert's symptoms. It would turn out William was a hunter and a trapper. He would capture wild raccoons and use them as live bait to train his hunting dogs how to hunt. In the year and a half leading up to his death, he was bit 2 different times by raccoons. William died from rabies, and the rabies virus that was in his kidney was still present when it was transplanted into Robert's body. Ultimately, Robert was not the only person who received an organ transplant from William. There were 3 other people. The CDC was able to track those 3 people down, and all of them were totally healthy and not showing any signs of rabies, so either they didn't have it or they were super early stage, which meant they were eligible for the rabies vaccine. They all got the vaccine, and they lived happily ever after.